certainly we've got one of the best ones, if not the best one, on Fox. Big Noon Saturday, as Gus, Ginny, and I will have the call for the game, Ohio State and Michigan. Now, these picks have been heating up a little bit. I know that I was ice cold, absolute freezer box early in the year, and yet we have come back. In the last 3 weeks, we are 11-3 and now 31-34 on the year as we get all set for this week's games. Okay, here we go. Live in Ann Arbor, Michigan hosts the number one team in the country, Ohio State, in the game. Now, I think it's important to understand how these two programs have built themselves. Now, this is from an outsider's perspective, but Ohio State has built themselves as a program that can perennially contend for and potentially win national championships, and they were able to do that a year ago. Michigan, on the other hand, since COVID, under Jim Harbaugh, decided to specifically target and build themselves to match up with and beat Ohio State, which they've now done 4 straight times. So that's where we come into this game is a matchup, a style. These two rosters, what are they good at? Where are their strengths? Where are their weaknesses? And how will that play out in this ball game on Saturday in the Big House? That's always a fascinating aspect of this because obviously Ohio State, you would say, has the advantage from the skill perspective and the speed perspective. And then at least in the last 4 years, Michigan has had the advantage in the trenches, and they've been able to be more physical, in particular on the defensive line last year, specifically with Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham. Michigan wants a game that's close in the second half so that they can continue to lean into that physical nature. Everything that they're built on and about starts with their physical nature, defensively and offensively, which is why when I talk with anybody in that building, all they talk about is give us a chance, make it a close game in the fourth quarter. And they feel like that toughness will pay off for them in the fourth quarter, which it has by and large in the last 4 years. Now, they didn't kill Ohio State with the run game maybe the last 2 years in the fourth quarter like they did in 21 and 22, but they were good enough. And they got the proper conversions. They got enough conversions with the run game late in order to go get late scores and ultimately win the game. And last year, obviously, was, let's face it, a pretty shocking result as Michigan came into that game as 20-point dogs. So, candidly, I don't care what the line is in this game. This is a much better version of Michigan than went to Columbus last year and ended up beating the eventual national champions. It would shock me if this game is not close late, which is exactly what Michigan wants. By the way, weather forecast, exactly what Michigan wants as well. 30s, 50% chance of snow. I mean, if you wake up in your Sharon Moore and you see that weather forecast, you're like, yes, please. That's exactly what he would hope for. On the injury front, both programs are dealing with injuries right now. On the Ohio State side, it's Lorenzo Styles, the defensive back, the nickel back. He's questionable. And then obviously the two big ones, the wide receivers, which did not play last week, Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. Now, I remain optimistic that both of those guys will be on the field. Jeremiah Smith was actually on Caleb Downs' podcast earlier this week and basically alluded to the fact that, I'll be ready to go. I do think Carnell Tate will also be ready to go. I think the question for me more so is about effectiveness rather than availability. These guys will likely play. I remain very optimistic that they will play, but it is about effectiveness because, again, these guys are like sports cars, right? You get a dump truck in there, it doesn't matter if there's a flat tire, a dump truck can still be a dump truck, right? But when you are out on the outside and it's about precision and timing and skill and speed, it's more like a sports car. And one little thing that's wrong with a sports car doesn't allow that car to perform at the top end of its ability. Well, it's the same thing with wide receivers. So the effectiveness of Smith and Tate, I think, will be something that all of us are interested in early in that game and certainly be well aware of. On the Michigan side, it does feel like Jordan Marshall, who hurt his shoulder against Northwestern, I think he's probably going to be on the field. I remain optimistic that he will play. Again, effectiveness rather than availability. I think it's probably a pain tolerance deal with Jordan Marshall. He was so effective. After Justice Haynes, of course, went out. Justice Haynes was probably the best back in the country. Then all of a sudden, Marshall stepped in when Haynes got injured and had to have the foot surgery, and Marshall was outstanding, and that run game seemed to be the vintage Michigan run game. He went down against Northwestern. They were able to run the ball well against Maryland, again, leaning into that offensive line. I think Marshall will be on the field, but I think a bigger question would be Max Bredesen. And I know he doesn't touch the football a lot, but when you're going to try to lean into the physical nature, you've got to have the guy that you would say epitomizes that physical nature, and that's Max Bredesen, number 44. Now, if you watch Michigan at all, which I have intently all year long, you would know that Max Bredesen is about as important a player to their offense as anybody, and he doesn't even touch the ball. It's because of his threat as a blocker. Again, toughness, physicality. The ball generally finds him. Wherever he's going, the ball follows because he's devastating as a blocker. He was in a boot and crutches after the Maryland game, and so his availability is called into question, and his effectiveness is called into question. Now, knowing Max as well as I do, and it's, I think this guy is as tough as they come in college football, and I would be shocked if he doesn't try at least to play. Again, effectiveness over availability. Now, when you get into the actual matchup here, let's start when Michigan has the ball. They're best, and we all know it, when they're able to establish the run and then allow their young quarterback, Bryce Underwood, to throw the football off of the run game, whether it's him getting outside of the pocket, utilizing those movement throws. They're not as good if you put them into a box where he doesn't have the RPO, he doesn't have the play action, and he just has to sit there as a drop back passer. Plus, that's a matchup that is really tough for a young quarterback because this Ohio State defense disguises their coverage as well as anybody. They also match in coverage as well as anybody, whether it's man or zone. They produce tight windows for the quarterback to throw the ball into. So it's tough to know what defense they're in. And even if you do know what defense they're in, the windows are very tight. So Michigan cannot get into a situation where they're in a drop back game against this Ohio State team. The pass rush, even though it hasn't been devastated, has been effective. In particular, when you get into those positions where the quarterback has to sit there and drop back. We saw that last week against Rutgers with Caden Curry. So them running the football, speaking of Michigan, is paramount in this game, and I think we all know that. Getting to those tight ends, getting the ball out to Andrew Marsh. Patricia will have some disguises cooked up. Matt Patricia, the defensive coordinator. That's going to be a great matchup to watch. Then when Ohio State has the ball, here's the key for Ohio State. Be yourself. Last year, I felt like they got sucked into trying to win the toughness battle, and they weren't going to do that against Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham. And Michigan was allowed, or they were able, to just sit there in what I would consider to be a very safe pass defense. Two safeties back. They were able to double team Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka at times and stop the run with a light run box where they didn't have to commit resources in order to stop the run. Now, they don't have Grant and Graham anymore. So do they have to commit resources to stop the running game of Ohio State? That's question number one. Question number two is, what type of game plan is Brian Hartline and Ryan Day going to use in this ball game? Because if they're themselves and they attack on the outside, and more specifically down the field and attack those safeties from Michigan, that would be advantage Ohio State. They did not do that a year ago, and they got sucked into this run game where they did not want to throw the football on the outside, and they played too safe. I don't think they're going to do that. They learned the lesson last year. We saw that in the playoff when they came out and turned into the Death Star Supernova that just attacked down the field against Tennessee and against Oregon. So if that lesson bleeds into this version of the game, I think that we'll see Ohio State be a little bit more aggressive. They got Smith on the outside. They got Tate on the outside. They got Max Clare, a great tight end. They need to attack those safeties of the Michigan Wolverines. Going to be a great game. Big Noon Kickoff is going to be live at 9 a.m. Lots of guests, lots of big stars on the 3-hour edition of Big Noon Kickoff. And then Gus, Ginny, and I will have the call of the game at noon on Fox. Thank you for watching the Joel Klatt Show YouTube channel. And if you liked this clip, make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel. And you can stay up to date on all of my college football coverage.